and welcome to a presentation by the Montana Human Rights Bureau on creating a respectful work environment. Part 1. The value of a respectful work environment. There is a fundamental concept at the heart of various religious and philosophical viewpoints relating to human dignity. These viewpoints have greatly impacted the governmental framework, constitutions, and laws around the world. The United States, and more specifically our great state of Montana, are no exception. The preamble of our state constitution acknowledges that its citizens desire quality of life and equality of opportunity. In Article 2 of the Constitution of Montana, what's coined as the Individual Dignity Clause can be found, which states, "The dignity of the human being is inviolable. No person shall be denied the equal protection of the laws. Neither the state nor any person, firm, corporation, or institution shall discriminate against any person." The Latin root of the word dignity is worth, which suggests that dignity points to a standard by which people should be viewed or treated. So why does this matter, and how does it relate to respect in the workplace? As mentioned previously, our laws stem from this fundamental core that human beings possess a special value intrinsic to their humanity and are worthy of respect simply because they are human beings. Discrimination laws seek to right the wrongs of a society's failure to recognize the human dignity of every person. And there can be consequences to violating discrimination laws. So we've talked about the stick regarding a respectful workplace, which is the consequences of violating the law. Let's take a moment now to recognize the carrot. Having a respectful workplace where everyone is treated with respect is good for business. The bottom line is we all need to work to earn a living, and we rely on customers to keep our businesses afloat. Where there's respect among employees, there is higher employee morale, which results in more productivity and lower turnover rates. Where there is respect for customers, customer service improves, leading to improved customer satisfaction. And both respect among employees and for customers can result in a boost to the business reputation because, let's face it, both customers and employees talk to others about the businesses where they work and patronize. And when carrots just won't cut it, we have the Montana Human Rights Bureau. Montana has some great laws that protect every single one of us from discrimination, starting with our Constitution, as mentioned previously, and right down to our state statutes. The state laws are the Montana Human Rights Act and the Governmental Code of Fair Practices. Back when these laws were passed in the 1970s, they set up the Human Rights Bureau to be the first place responsible for enforcing these laws. What this means is if someone thinks they've been discriminated against and want to recover under these state laws, instead of filing a complaint in district court, that person begins the process by filing a discrimination complaint with the Montana Human Rights Bureau. The fact that someone must come to us first and exhaust the administrative process with the state before going to court means we're the exclusive remedy. The Bureau is also a neutral entity, which means it does not represent charging parties that file complaints with our Bureau, nor do we defend the respondents. Instead, our fidelity is to the law that we're charged to enforce. I also want to point out that the Bureau has a contract with the EEOC to investigate employment discrimination cases when they fall under the federal discrimination laws too. This doesn't really change much in how we operate, since under most circumstances, our state discrimination laws parallel federal laws. So what does the Human Rights Bureau do? Our main function is to conduct independent and neutral investigations into complaints of discrimination. It's important to understand that the Bureau does not get to turn away a complaint that's filed. We're obligated by statute to conduct an investigation. Complaints come to our Bureau in three ways. One way is through the Bureau's intake process. This is an hour-long telephone appointment with an investigator to discuss whether or not a caller's situation falls within the laws enforced by the Bureau. We also receive complaints for filing that are self-drafted or attorney-drafted. The Montana Human Rights Bureau also provides mediation services, which are voluntary and confidential. And lastly, the Bureau offers education to the public. We do this as a preventative effort to further awareness of discrimination laws. Part 2. The antithesis of respect: discrimination. In the previous section, I laid out that in a very practical way, discrimination laws set out our standards as a society of how we interact with and treat one another in various settings. So it's important for you to understand some basics of what the law says is unlawful discrimination. At its most basic, discrimination is an adverse action taken in a protected area against somebody because of their protected class status. When thinking about the definition of unlawful discrimination, it's important to understand what some of those terms mean within the definition. Protected areas include employment, public accommodations, governmental services, housing, education, insurance, and financial transactions. The protected areas that apply to most businesses are employment and public accommodation. This means that a business can be on the hook for discrimination if one of its employees discriminate against a fellow employee, or if one of its employees discriminate against a customer or potential customer. It's also important to be familiar with the protected classes in order to fully understand the definition of unlawful discrimination. Under Montana law, the protected classes include age, sex, race, color, religion, creed, mental or physical disability, national origin, marital status, and political belief in the areas of governmental services and government employment, and familial status in the area of housing. Montana also recognizes the protected class of vaccination status. Here you see some of the different types of discrimination cases we see at the Bureau. Disparate treatment is where someone's treated differently based on his or her protected class. An example is an employer writing someone up who's disabled when someone who is not disabled wouldn't get disciplined for the same thing. Another example is a business charging extra or providing subpar service to a customer because they are transgender. Denial of service is when a business refuses to serve someone because of their protected class. For example, if a liquor store will not sell to a Native American who produces tribal ID for age verification, the Native American is being refused service based on race. Printed notice cases involve some type of advertisement, publication, or posting that states or implies that service will be denied based on a protected class. So like in the example with the liquor store, if the store has a sign posted on the door or at the register saying it will not take tribal IDs to sell alcohol, then that printed notice is direct evidence of discrimination. Printed notice can also apply to job vacancy or other advertisements by an employer that state or imply a limitation based on a protected class. Harassment or hostile work environment is another type of discrimination case we see at the Bureau. Unlawful harassment is offensive, unwelcome conduct that targets someone based on their protected class. The conduct is typically verbal or physical contact that a reasonable person would find offensive. Examples of that conduct include slurs or name-calling, jokes, innuendo or comments, pictures, lyrics and music, blocking someone's movement, pushing, or intimate touching. So you could do any of these things and it has the potential to be disrespectful, which of course we want to avoid. However, if any of these things are done and they are done with a motivation to target someone based on their protected class, it has crossed the line to illegal. And regarding being offended or finding the conduct unwelcome, someone can tell you they don't like the conduct, or it can be as simple as shaking their head in disapproval or turning and walking away. Just by leaving the room, the person has likely expressed that your offensive conduct is unwelcome. Also, in harassment, there are people called collateral targets. These people are subjected to offensive, unwelcome conduct, but may not be the primary target of the conduct. So, for example, the Bureau had a harassment case filed by an employee in a healthcare office, and although the conduct was not directed towards the employee, she was subjected to what she called a frat house environment, where coworkers and supervisors made sexual comments and noises, played sexually explicit videos in the workplace, and discussed genitalia and orgies. This employee was a collateral target of sex-based harassment. Here we see 3 other types of discrimination cases. By association complaints are when someone is discriminated against because of their association with someone in a protected class. So for example, if a parent of a homosexual child is refused service at a business because of the child's sexual orientation, the parent has been discriminated against because of their child's membership in the protected class of sex. Another example would be an employer refusing to hire a black man because he's married to a white woman and the employer disapproves. Another type of complaint is failure to accommodate. Businesses are required to provide their employees and customers reasonable accommodations for disabilities and religion. And lastly, retaliation is when an adverse act is taken against someone because they opposed discrimination or requested an accommodation. So, for example, if a customer approaches you and says, "I didn't appreciate your tone with that other customer and I think you treated them that way because they're Asian," that person has opposed discrimination. If you then refuse to serve the complaining customer because you didn't like that they complained, you have retaliated against them for opposing discrimination. Part 3. Do's and don'ts of creating a respectful workplace. First up, we're going to spend some time talking about the don'ts. These pointers are meant to help you and your colleagues stay out of hot water with each other and customers. It's always good practice to avoid gossip, disparaging comments, and inappropriate jokes in general if you're trying to create a respectful work environment. But even beyond that, in order to avoid having a discrimination complaint filed against your business, do not casually share information, speculate, or gossip about anyone's sex life, including a person's sexual orientation, gender identity, or status. Remember that the protected class of sex includes not only biological sex, but also sexual orientation, gender identity, and pregnancy. So talking about these things, starting rumors, or making innuendos could subject you to a harassment complaint. Also note that repeated, intentional misgendering or refusal to use preferred pronouns of a coworker or customer can also be harassment under the law. It's also good practice to avoid gossip and disparaging comments about someone's religious beliefs or practices. For example, making fun of a Native American coworker because of his braids or imitating a ceremonial dance is not only disrespectful, it could amount to harassment. Again, age is a protected class in Montana at any age, so making comments or jokes about someone being young or old could be harassing behavior and something that should be avoided if you're trying to create a respectful atmosphere. Continuing on with good practices of things to avoid if you want to stay out of hot water, a person's mental or physical abilities should not be the butt of jokes. And keep in mind that sometimes you may not be aware that the characteristic you're making fun of has its root in disability. Not all disabilities are visible, So be aware that if you repeatedly make comments to a coworker about how brain dead he is, or, man, I just told you that 5 minutes ago, you can't remember anything, perhaps the person has early onset Alzheimer's or some other mental illness that impacts memory. Inappropriate jokes or comments about someone's appearance or features should also be off limits. Both negative and positive remarks about a coworker or customer's body can be harassment. Also, inappropriate comments about an African American's hair texture or style can be harassment. Eyes and nose shape can also be an indication of race, so disparaging comments related to those features should be avoided. Cultural aspects or practices and where someone is from should be respected as well. Many people honor their culture or religion in their manner of dress. Think of a Scottish kilt, the African kanga, or a Japanese kimono. These clothing items represent a culture and can be tied to someone's race or national origin. Also consider the dress of Hasidic Jews, Sikhs, and Hutterites. How these communities dress reflect their religion, which of course is a protected class, just like race and national origin. Therefore, not only should making fun of these things be avoided in order to keep from discriminating against someone, but also to make sure a respectful and inclusive environment is maintained. So we've gone over various tips for good practices to avoid getting hit with a discrimination complaint and to create a more inclusive workplace. But now we're going to talk about a few things that cross the line and should never be acceptable to do at work or a place of business. And also keep in mind, as we're talking about these don'ts, even if they don't amount to unlawful discrimination, there's a good chance they could still be a violation of your organization's policies against discrimination or harassment, which means you may get disciplined for a policy violation. First, it should never be acceptable to imitate a person's accent or physical disability in a mocking manner. Second, no one should ever call someone a derogatory name based on race or sexual orientation. It is unacceptable to refer to someone as a dyke or tranny. Next, you should not call anyone retard or ask them if they took their meds. These types of comments are derogatory towards a person with a disability, but also, remember, someone can belong to the protected class of disability even if they're not disabled, if you think or believe they're disabled. Referring to someone as a terrorist who's from the Middle East is unacceptable, just as referring to someone as a Nazi because they're white or from Germany, Idaho, or Western Montana is unacceptable. Lastly, it should never be acceptable to breach someone's personal space by touching them. Everyone's personal boundaries should be respected. And one last note about these pointers on don'ts is intention. In these types of situations, your intent doesn't matter. You may have only been joking or didn't mean to be harassing or disrespectful. However, if it comes across that way to a reasonable person and the behavior was unwelcome, not only have you damaged the respectful relationship and environment, you may have unlawfully harassed someone. Always stop to think how what you are saying or doing may be interpreted by others beforehand in order to stay out of hot water. So now we've gone over the don'ts, let's talk about the do's. We are all responsible for creating and participating in building a respectful and inclusive place where our coworkers and customers feel comfortable. One bad apple can spoil the whole bunch, so we must take personal responsibility and do our best each day. One thing to keep in mind, and that might help you check your emotions, your naughty tongue, or your urge to act out, is the very real likelihood that you may be recorded. Nowadays, you never know. Everyone has a phone, and some recording devices are so sleek, you would have no idea that your bad day just became a liability. This is an actual recording submitted in a case investigated several years back. The conversation is between a business owner and his customer who is from Iraq and Muslim. The business owner did not know he was being recorded and initially denied harassing the customer. The Bureau's investigations are informal, meaning we can look at evidence like this that may not be admitted in court. Based on this recording, the Bureau found cause to believe that the business discriminated against the customer because of his national origin, Iraqi, and his religion, Muslim. So take a listen, take note, and always assume you're being recorded.
Fuck Iran.
Why do you hate people from Iraq that bad?
Because all they do is abuse our shit country, take our money, then they want to spread their demonic religion, and I don't go along with it.
What makes you think that?
Because I see it.
What do you see?
Bullshit religions that are made up as time goes by.
Where did you see that?
Because it is.
So that means if you see like two or different people, three people, you think all people like that?
No, hell no, I hope they're not. We'd be in a lot of trouble.
Because what are you saying against Iraqi people? I'm Iraqi, so that means you're saying against me too.
Well, if you're from Iran, yeah, you go back home where you came from. We don't need you here. We didn't ask you to come here. That's the way it works.
So you don't ask me to come here?
To my country? No.
Uh-huh.
Why would I want them in my country when they bring their bullshit with them? Then they want to build their fucking temples and do all kinds of weird shit.
But who are you to tell me to go back to my country?
This is my country.
This is your country?
Yeah.
Okay.
The next do on our list to create a respectful work environment is if you see something, say something. If you see a coworker acting inappropriately towards a customer or another employee, have the courage to do what's right and speak up. Be the hero for that person who's being mistreated. It could be as simple as reminding the coworker that that kind of behavior is not tolerated here. We should all take responsibility if we cross the line. No one can get it right 100% of the time, but the key is to owning up to your mistake and being accountable. You'd be surprised how many times a sincere apology saves the day. We should all do our best to make a friendly and engaging environment. It's okay to say, "Hey there, how you doing today?" And it's always right to give credit where it's due and hand out sincere compliments. If you have questions about someone's beliefs, traditions, or culture, just to name a few, or if you aren't sure whether something is offensive or not, it's okay to ask. Just make sure you're engaging in that conversation and asking your questions in a respectful manner. Every day we interact with people who have different backgrounds, ideologies, lifestyles, abilities, and so on. It's all these things that make us who we are and make us unique. Many of these things are invisible to the eye. You may not know that your coworker is a person with a disability, or you may not know that the customer that was just rude to you is having a very bad day because she just learned her child has cancer. But it's all of our different characteristics and experiences that can bring innovation, interesting insights, and learning opportunities for us. But in order for us to gain the value from that diversity, we must recognize each other's inherent human dignity that makes us worthy of equal treatment and respect. That doesn't mean you have to agree with everyone's opinions or lifestyles, but you do have to treat them the way you would want to be treated. Which really means in the end, it all boils down to the golden rule. Treat others the way you would want to be treated. Would you like to learn more? Check out our other videos on our YouTube channel. Just search for Montana Human Rights Bureau, or visit our website at montanadiscrimination.com. You can also give us a call at 1-800-542-0807 or 406-444-2884.